This was last fall, in the first week or two of October. I'm not entirely sure how to start this, because it honestly all happened completely out of the blue. It was a normal Monday afternoon. I'd gotten out of work and pulled up to my home just after sunset, and usually I'll park in the garage and head inside from there. But as I pulled in, I noticed something hanging on the front door, so instead I parked in the driveway and went up there to see what it was. Taped right on the door handle was an envelope. I knew right away it wasn't some random soliciting ad mail because it had my name handwritten with a pen on the front. Inside was a handwritten letter. It was short, but what it said I found pretty disturbing. Essentially, the person mentioned they've been interested in me and wanted to meet at a specific place and time the following day. Oddly, that was one of my days off of work, but I figured it was just a coincidence. The writer of the letter didn't sign it though, so I had no idea who it was. Obviously, there was no way I was going to go anywhere and meet with some random person. I headed inside, tore up the letter, and tossed it in the trash. I thought the whole thing was pretty disturbing because they knew my name and my address, and said they were interested in me, which is just a strange thing to say, given I had no idea who they even were. Anyway, I thought tearing up the letter would help me not to stress about it too much, as there wasn't anything I could do about it. At least, not yet. After all, it could have just been some stupid prank. I went on with my night and got in bed just before 11. Like I mentioned before, I was off the following day, so I slept in and spent pretty much the entire day inside. Can't even remember what I did all day, but I know I made dinner late, like 8 or 9, and started getting ready for bed right after. I went upstairs and into the bedroom to take a long, relaxing shower. However, a little ways into it, I heard the doorbell ring. Confused who could have been outside my home at this time of night, I opened the shower curtain and listened for a minute. But with nothing else, I figured they left. I wouldn't have answered the door anyway. I closed the curtain and continued with my shower. As I stood in the water and tried to relax though, I started connecting the dots between the letter from yesterday and the odd doorbell ring. I knew it could have been me completely overthinking it, but also the feeling that I wasn't felt a lot stronger with every minute passing. And then I heard something. It sounded like a few light thuds, or maybe creaks, somewhere right outside the shower curtain. I froze and listened, then quickly shut off the shower and moved the curtain aside. Nothing was there. My heart was still racing as I got out, dried off, and got dressed. First thing I knew I had to do was check the front door. I crept downstairs and looked out the peephole, but saw no one standing outside. So I opened the door. Immediately, a paper slip fell from the crease in the door. Before reaching down and grabbing it, I looked around outside. The trees rustling in the wind and the crickets chirping were the only sounds, and as far as I could tell, the whole neighborhood was still, dark, and quiet. Eerily so. I picked up the paper and closed the door, then unfolded it. It was a note in the same handwriting as the one from yesterday. As I read it, I could feel my blood rush and my face getting pale. The writer was clearly angry about me missing the meetup earlier today. It was like they really thought I was supposed to show up. And at the end of the letter, they signed their initials this time. DN. This was incredibly creepy and disturbing, as it was way more than just a small note. This felt way more personal and unsettling, and much less like just some small prank. I genuinely didn't know what to do, because he was already gone, and I still didn't know who it was. Even with their initials, I had no idea. I paced around the living room for a while, a good 30 minutes at least. Even then, as I paced around in my own home, I kept getting this uneasy feeling that I was being watched. I'd look and check out the windows and the door over and over, but never saw anything. Eventually, I knew I'd have to sleep. Overall, though, I decided that in the morning I would go to the police station and bring in the letter and see what they had to say about it. I started heading upstairs. As I reached the top, I suddenly heard those thumping or creaking sounds, the same ones I'd heard while in the shower, coming from inside the bedroom. I hurried into the room. Nothing. Not a single thing in there to warrant the sounds I'd been hearing. I'll admit they weren't concerning sounds at all. It was just with everything else going on that it made me feel like everything could be something, even though it likely was nothing at all. I closed and locked my bedroom door just in case, then checked the closet and every other spot in the room to make me feel better. And just before getting in bed, I remembered one other place. I never went out there, but there was a small balcony attached to this master bedroom. I was a private person and always kept the blinds closed, so I often forgot it was even there. I walked over and pushed aside the first few blinds so I could get to the door handle. I didn't even have to grab it to see that it was already unlocked. There was no way I left it like this. However, I didn't get a chance to open the door because just a second later, a figure moved from the corner of the outside balcony. I jolted my eyes at him, seeing he was staring at me as he moved closer to the other side of the door. I turned and sprinted out of the bedroom. I heard the balcony door open as I was leaving. I ran for the closest neighbor I knew would help me. The man didn't seem to be able to find where I ran off to. Police were at my house and searching around within 10 minutes. I was still incredibly nervous because I knew how awful it'd be if the man got away. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. They never found him. Me and a couple officers started going over the time frame of everything taking place, and it's pretty apparent that the man broke in while I was in the shower. Likely, the sounds I'd heard while in there were from him opening and closing the balcony door, where he went to hide. So since I'd heard those same sounds again, he must have at some point gone back inside the house while I was pacing around thinking about the letter, which makes that whole feeling of me being watched even more disturbing. And most of all, what I find really unsettling is that from the short glimpse I got from the man looking at me, I felt like he looked oddly familiar. Not like someone I knew, but maybe just someone I'd seen in passing at some point before. It kills me that I can't figure out where or when I'd seen him. It really could have been anything, like just passing him at a grocery store, which makes it way more disturbing that that was enough to get this man to follow and stalk me and form this dangerous fixation on me. A whole lot more could have happened that night, and all I can be is thankful that I got away mostly unharmed. It's been almost a year, and so far nothing else has come up. No notes, no weird sounds, nothing. I hope it's done, but even now I'm still constantly looking over my shoulder, unsure who's watching. I was driving from LA all the way back to the East Coast. I had taken the road trip to see a bunch of friends for a wedding and ended up staying for over a week. Because I stayed a little bit longer, I only had 4 days to get back home before my next shift at work, so I was really pushing it with how long I was driving. It was 1 a.m., and my eyes were killing me. It felt like my eyelids weighed 100 pounds. The only caffeine I had was a hot coffee from a gas station 3 hours back, so not very hot anymore, and I was in the middle of nowhere. It felt like a dead highway, nothing on either side of it, and barely any cars or trucks around. Just the occasional car speeding past me, only to disappear down the road 30 seconds later. As I tried to keep my eyes open, I noticed again headlights coming up behind me. They weren't very bright, so it must have been a pretty old car, without those crazy bright LEDs everyone has nowadays. The car was also going a lot slower than most that passed by. This one took forever to catch up to me. After tailing behind for a minute, it merged into the other lane and started to pass. I kept my eyes on the road, just making sure I stayed in my lane to let them through. But after a while of them not actually passing, I looked to my left to see what they were doing. The car was matching my speed right beside me. Some old, dusty, dark red car, and their window was down. From what I could see, there was just one man in the car, driving obviously, but he was also staring at me. I had my window up still, so I don't know if he actually could see me with it being dark and with the reflections and all, but he was looking at my window as if he could. The man didn't try to hide it either. His light was on inside his car, so I could see him clear as day. He looked red-eyed and kind of drunk, just from his expressions and movements. But he remained at the same speed and just stared at me. It really freaked me out. I tried slowing down, but he slowed down too. I slowed down even more, and again he matched my speed. So then I slowed down an absurd amount, like down to 25 miles per hour on the highway. And finally, he didn't copy me and just held his pace and kept driving. He disappeared down the road a minute later. I didn't know what the hell to think of that. Maybe he was a creep, maybe drunk, or honestly maybe both. Only a couple minutes after whatever that was happened, I was back to struggling to stay awake. I knew I needed some caffeine, and possibly even some rest for a minute. 15 minutes down the road, I pulled off the highway and into a really small rest stop. It looked like just some bathrooms and a coffee machine. No other cars were there. I parked and got out, walking up to the machine and getting a coffee, hoping it'd be enough. By the time I got it and headed back to my car, another car was pulling in. I instantly saw it was the same old red car from the highway earlier. How the hell was he pulling up behind me again? I never passed him, at least not knowingly, and there was nowhere else to pull off. He would have had to pull into the grass off the highway pretty far out and discreetly wait for me to pass. Otherwise, I'd have seen his car on the side of the road. I got in and looked in my mirrors for a second. He didn't pull in behind me though. He went right up next to me, like he did on the highway. I could just feel his eyes staring at me, too much to ignore. I looked over, and sure enough, that's what he was doing, staring right at me with those red, unsettling eyes. What did this dude want from me? I turned my car on, but the guy started talking. He was yelling something, trying to get my attention through the window. I looked over again, and he reached over and opened his passenger door, motioning for me to get in, with this disturbingly friendly expression on his face. I started to pull away, glancing over one more time and seeing the instant shift into a dead stare. I got back onto the highway, but the guy followed. He kept trying to do the same thing where he'd merge into the other lane and match my speed, but this time I wasn't having it. I was getting a little more aggressive, trying to keep him away from me, but he matched my energy, also getting more aggressive. I could have sworn he even tried to pit maneuver me several times, but I braked just quick enough before he could hit my car. Eventually, I saw one of those emergency vehicle U-turn spots, a pass-through to get onto the other side of the highway that went in the opposite direction. In a rather dangerous and illegal split-second decision, I turned onto it before he could even react and follow me. As I safely got onto the other side of the highway and sped in the other direction, I looked in my mirrors. I felt my heart continue racing for a moment. For a second, his brake lights turned on, but it seemed he gave up, as a moment later, his lights faded out and continued the other way. I was shaking for the next little bit, finding a gas station and just taking a break for an hour to cool off and to keep distance between me and that guy. During that time, I put in a tip for the police, mainly saying I thought he was just a drunk driver driving dangerously, but it didn't come up to much of anything. That was until 4 days later, well after I'd made it back home. Having time to actually breathe, I looked up if the cops ever caught any drunk drivers on that road recently, thinking I might find the dude's mugshot or something. But what I found made this whole thing more disturbing than I ever could have imagined. A day before I left LA, there had been a disappearance of someone on that very road. They found their car in the grass, and the person was just gone. No traces. The only clue they had was from a different driver on the road, who mentioned they saw a rusty red car driving erratically around the car that was later found abandoned in the grass. Reading the whole case almost felt like deja vu. It was exactly like what I experienced that night, only I made it out safely. Had things gone any other way, that night could have taken a really disturbing turn, and I likely would have disappeared too. This past winter, I stayed in a cabin in the northeast part of Washington state for a week. It was a winter cabin, meant for staying in during the cold season and enjoying the winter scenery out in the mountains, which usually wasn't possible in regular three-season cabins. When I got there, it hadn't snowed yet, but by the time I woke up after my first night, snow had began coming down. It was a lot, too, enough to keep me cozied up inside for the whole day. The fireplace, with the cabin look and feel, made for a great, relaxing time. I got real tired around 9 p.m. and decided to get to bed, but I had to run out to my car real quick to grab a bag I forgot to bring in yesterday. I put my shoes and jacket on, then opened the door to run outside, when I immediately saw that the snow on the porch was messed with, like something had been there. When I got further out, the spots in the snow became more clearly footprints. I could even see the print that their boots left behind. I then looked to see where they came from, but lost sight of them, going out toward the woods. There was no saying how long ago this was, but I'd never heard them on the porch. Whoever it was didn't knock or anything. I got what I needed from the car, then headed back in. Since they didn't knock, and I didn't get a text from the cabin rental place, I figured it wasn't anything important. I got in bed and fell asleep. For the next 2 days I was at the cabin, there wasn't all that much to mention. I did the same, pretty much being inside by the fireplace all day. But through those 2 days, several more times I checked outside and saw fresh footprints in the snow. Always the same ones, coming up to the porch and going back in the same direction. So, on the third day, I decided to go in that direction and see what was out there. I put on a heavy jacket and walked into the woods. The footprints were long covered up by then, by the snowfall from last night, so I was just walking in the general direction I'd remembered seeing them going. I only made it a little ways into the trees before realizing everything looked the same. Like it was all just a blanket of snow over everything, in every direction. And with the downfall already starting to cover up my tracks, I knew I risked getting lost if I went any deeper. From being out there, though, I saw nothing of interest that anyone could have been out there for. No paths or roads or trails. I went back to the cabin and warmed up. Strangely, after that, no footprints showed up on the porch for the rest of that day. It was like whoever it was knew I was looking for them, and so they kept away. That's what I was hoping for, anyway. Hours later, the sun fell past the trees, and the woods and cabin were quiet. The soft breeze of the snowfall outside was the only noise aside from the crackling fireplace. I hadn't thought about the strange footprints in a while. I stayed up relatively late, not getting in bed until 12 a.m. I fell asleep quickly with the winter ambiance outside. I felt like I was knocked out for a while, definitely a couple cycles of sleep before I woke up, so it was probably about 3 a.m. The sound of wind and snow outside were still coming through the cabin walls, but there was another sound. A crunch every couple of seconds. Someone stepping in the snow, very, very slowly. Honestly, I don't know if I would have known it was footsteps, let alone woken up, if I didn't already know about the footprints being outside the cabin. That's how slow they were walking. I sat up in bed. For some reason, I was pretty calm. Nervous for sure, but not scared really. I was confident I could hold my own if something were to happen. I know it was very arrogant of me, maybe dangerously so. I listened until the sound stopped. It seemed to go somewhere on the other end of the cabin, the back wall maybe, where the fireplace was. So after a few minutes of not hearing anything else, I got up and left the bedroom, looking down the main hallway. It was really dark. There were no lights built into this hallway, so when I looked down, I saw nothing. In that moment, though, a very strong, uncontrollable feeling took over the false confidence that I had just a few moments ago. Suddenly, I was really nervous that something was wrong, more than just someone walking around outside. I took a few steps into the hallway. Still, I heard nothing. I moved all the way to the end, where the living room/kitchen was, and just when I took a step toward the front door, I heard a loud thump on the floor behind me. I spun around and looked down the hallway I just came from. I only caught a quick sight of someone moving quickly through the shadows, rushing down the hallway toward me. I ran straight for the front door, grabbing the keys I'd left right by it, and running out barefoot through the snow to my car. I got in and couldn't see anything at all, as the entire windshield was covered in a thick layer of snow. I didn't know if he was chasing me, or right in front of the car, which made the whole thing even more horrifying. Thankfully, I could see out of my back windshield, being upright and small, so I began backing out, going as fast as I could down the gravel driveway. I did end up making it out of there. Took over an hour for a cop to show up, and by then, the footprints of him leaving the cabin were covered, so it wasn't even clear where he went. From what we could find though, the man got in through a window on the far wall near the fireplace. Putting what happened together, most likely he then quietly crept to the farthest bedroom down the hall to look for me. It was the only other one aside from the one I was staying in. Had he chosen correctly, I would have been face to face with him and had nowhere to run. But instead, I left my room at the perfect timing, giving me a chance to escape. It's insane and honestly terrifying how just a couple of seconds made all the difference.